From the mighty tanks that defended France to the nimble reconnaissance vehicles that crossed battlefields, this is the complete catalogue of every French vehicle used in World War II. Let's start with the armoured fighting machines that shaped the early war. Heavy and medium tanks. Char B-1 bis. The Char B-1 bis was France's most powerful tank when the war began in 1939. This heavy tank weighed 32 tons and carried a 75mm howitzer in the hull, plus a 47mm gun in the turret. French crews used it during the Battle of France in May 1940, where it proved nearly impossible for German tanks to destroy from the front. The thick armour could stop most German shells, and in several encounters, single Char B-1 bis tanks defeated multiple German panzers. However, the tank had serious weaknesses, including a very short range of only 150 kilometers and a crew of 4 that struggled to operate it efficiently. The commander had to aim the turret gun, load it, and direct the tank all at once. Despite its combat strength, only around 400 were built, and mechanical breakdowns were common during the rapid German advance. Char D2. The Char D2 served as France's main medium tank in the years before the war. It weighed 20 tons and mounted a 47mm gun in a cast turret with better armor protection than earlier designs. The French army deployed these tanks with infantry support units during the invasion of 1940. Combat performance was mixed because the tank moved slowly at only 23 km/h and had thin side armor. German anti-tank guns could penetrate it easily from the flanks. Around 100 Char D2 tanks fought in France, and they achieved some local successes when properly supported. The single-man turret created the same problem as other French tanks, forcing the commander to do too many jobs. After France fell, Germany captured many of these vehicles and used some for training or occupation duties. Sumo S-35. The Sumo S-35 was considered one of the best tank designs in the world in 1940. This cavalry tank weighed almost 20 tons and featured a powerful 47mm gun with excellent armor made from cast steel sections. French cavalry units relied on it for mobile operations, and it could reach speeds of 40 km/h. During the Battle of France, the S-35 performed exceptionally well in tank versus tank combat and could destroy any German tank it faced. At the Battle of Hainaut in Belgium, S-35 tanks inflicted heavy losses on German forces. The main limitation was the one-man turret and poor radio equipment that made coordination between tanks extremely difficult. France produced about 400 of these vehicles. After the French surrender, Germany took many S-35 tanks and used them for various duties, including occupation forces and training schools. Renault R-35. The Renault R-35 became the most numerous French tank, with over 1,600 built by 1940. This light infantry tank weighed only 10 tons and carried a short 37mm gun. The French army designed it to support foot soldiers at walking speed, so it moved very slowly, at just 20 km/h. During the German invasion, R-35 tanks were spread across many infantry divisions. The thick frontal armor provided good protection against light weapons, but the small guns struggled against German tanks. The two-man crew and limited vision made combat difficult. Despite being outclassed, these tanks fought in nearly every major battle of the French campaign. Germany later used captured R-35 tanks for occupation duties, and some were converted into self-propelled guns or ammunition carriers. Hotchkiss H-39. The Hotchkiss H-39 improved on earlier Hotchkiss tank designs, with better armor and a more powerful engine. This cavalry tank weighed 12 tons and mounted a 37mm gun. It could reach 36 km/h, making it faster than many other French tanks. The French cavalry deployed over 1,000 of these tanks by May 1940. In battle, the H-39 showed decent mobility and reliability. However, the armor was still relatively thin compared to heavier tanks, and the 37mm gun lacked stopping power against German medium tanks. The one-man turret remained a critical weakness. These tanks saw action throughout the Battle of France, often fighting in small groups. After the surrender, Germany captured hundreds and used them for various purposes, including police duties in occupied territories and conversion to self-propelled anti-tank guns. FCM-36. The FCM-36 was a light infantry support tank produced in limited numbers before the war. It weighed just over 12 tons and carried a short 37mm gun in a small turret. The French army ordered only 100 of these tanks, and they equipped just a few battalions. The FCN-36 featured welded armor construction, which was modern for its time. During combat in 1940, these tanks supported infantry attacks, but faced the same problems as other French light tanks. The gun could not effectively engage German armor, and the slow speed of 24 kilometers per hour limited tactical flexibility. The two-man crew struggled with the workload. Most FCM-36 tanks were lost during the Battle of France through combat damage or abandonment during the retreat. Very few survived to be captured by German forces. Renault R40. The Renault R40 was an improved version of the R35, with a longer 37mm gun and slightly better armor. Production began in 1940, but only about 300 were completed before France fell. These tanks were issued to armored units just as the German invasion began. The longer gun gave somewhat better anti-tank capability than the R35, but it still struggled against German Neon tanks. The R40 maintained the slow speed of its predecessor, limiting its usefulness in mobile warfare. During the brief period they were in service, R40 tanks fought alongside R35s in defensive positions. The two-man crew and limited vision devices continued to hamper effectiveness. After the French defeat, some R40 tanks were captured and used by Germany for security duties. Char D1. The Char D1 served as France's first modern medium tank in the 1930s. It weighed 14 tons and carried a 47mm gun. By 1940, most D1 tanks were outdated compared to newer designs. The French army still had around 160 in service at the start of the invasion. These tanks fought primarily in infantry support roles. The armor was thinner than later tanks, making them vulnerable to German anti-tank weapons. Speed was limited to just 18 kilometers per hour. During combat operations, D1 tanks suffered heavy losses due to their obsolete design. The three-man crew was better than some French tanks, but overall combat effectiveness was poor. Most were destroyed or captured during the rapid German advance through France. AMX-38. The AMX-38 was a prototype cavalry tank that never entered mass production. Only a handful were built before the war started. This design attempted to improve on the AMX-40 concept with better armor and a 47mm gun. The French army tested these vehicles, but chose not to order them in large quantities. When the German invasion began, the few AMX-38 tanks that existed were not ready for combat service. They remained in testing facilities or depots. The tank showed promise with good mobility and decent firepower for its size. However, the collapse of France in June 1940 ended any chance of the AMX-38 entering production. Char IIc. The Char IIc was a super heavy tank from World War I that still existed in 1940. These enormous vehicles weighed 69 tons and carried a 75mm gun. France had only 10 of these ancient tanks remaining. They were completely obsolete by 1940 standards, with thin armor for their size and a top speed of just 15 kilometers per hour. When Germany invaded, the French attempted to move these tanks to the front lines by rail. German aircraft attacked the railway transports, and all the Char IIc tanks were destroyed or abandoned before seeing combat. They represented an outdated approach to tank design that had no place in modern mobile warfare. Light tanks and tankettes. Renault Feat. The Renault Feat was a legendary tank from World War I that France still operated in 1940. Over 3,000 had been built originally, and several hundred remained in service. This small tank weighed only 7 tons and carried either a 37mm gun or a machine gun. The French army used them mainly for training and second-line duties. When Germany invaded, some Feat tanks were pressed into combat out of desperation. They were hopelessly outdated, with thin armor and a maximum speed of just 7 kilometers per hour. The two-man crew operated in cramped conditions. In 1944, these tanks could not effectively fight modern German forces and were easily destroyed by anti-tank weapons. Their main value was in training new crews. Some were used in static defensive positions. Hotchkiss H-35. The Hotchkiss H-35 was an early cavalry tank that entered service in the mid-1930s. It weighed 11 tons and mounted a short 37mm gun. Over 1,000 were built, making it quite common in French armored units. The H-35 featured decent armor protection and could move at 28 kilometers per hour. During the Battle of France, these tanks equipped many cavalry and light mechanized divisions. Combat effectiveness was limited by the weak gun and the one-man turret. The commander had to aim, load, and fire, while also directing the driver. Vision was poor through small observation ports. Despite these problems, H-35 tanks fought throughout the campaign. Germany captured large numbers after the surrender and later used them for occupation forces, police work, and training purposes. AMEM-35. The AMEM-35 was a light reconnaissance tank designed for cavalry scouting missions. It weighed only 5 tons and came in 2 versions, one with a machine gun and another with a 13mm heavy machine gun. France produced about 200 of these small vehicles. They could reach 55 km per hour on roads, making them among the fastest French armoured vehicles. During the 1940 campaign, AMR-35s performed reconnaissance duties ahead of larger cavalry units. The thin armour provided protection only against small arms fire. Any anti-tank weapon could easily penetrate it. The 2-man crew consisted of a driver and a commander who operated the weapon. These vehicles were useful for scouting, but could not fight enemy tanks. Many were lost to German fire during reconnaissance missions. AMR-33. The AMR-33 preceded the AMR-35 as France's reconnaissance vehicle. This tiny machine weighed just over 5 tons and carried only a machine gun. About 120 were built in the early 1930s. By 1940, they were considered obsolete, but still remained in service with some cavalry units. The AMR-33 could reach 55 km per hour, but offered very little protection. The armor was thin enough that heavy machine guns could penetrate it. During combat in 1940, these vehicles tried to perform scouting missions, but were extremely vulnerable. The 2-man crew had limited visibility and firepower. Most AMR-33s were quickly knocked out or abandoned during the German invasion. They represented an early attempt at mechanized reconnaissance that was surpassed by later designs. Renault UE. The Renault UE was a small tracked carrier used to transport supplies and tow equipment. It weighed only 2.6 tons and had no armament except what the 2-man crew carried personally. France produced over 5,000 of these useful vehicles. They served with infantry units to carry ammunition, supplies, and weapons. The Renault UE could tow small anti-tank guns into position. During the Battle of France, these carriers proved valuable for logistical support. They could move supplies across rough ground where wheeled vehicles struggled. The open-top design left the crew exposed to artillery and small arms fire. Speed was limited to 30 km per hour. After France fell, Germany captured thousands of these carriers and used them extensively, often modifying them into light, self-propelled guns or ammunition carriers. Renault ACG-1. The Renault ACG-1 was an experimental light tank that appeared in limited numbers. It weighed 12 tons and featured an unusual design with the engine in the front. Only a few prototypes existed when war broke out. The French army had not adopted this design for mass production. These vehicles remained in testing or storage during the 1940 campaign. The ACG-1 showed some interesting features, including decent mobility and a 47mm gun. However, the front-mounted engine created problems with crew layout and visibility. France's rapid defeat meant this design never had a chance to prove itself in combat. The prototypes were likely captured or destroyed when Germany occupied France. Lorraine 37L. The Lorraine 37L was a tracked supply carrier similar to the Renault UE, but larger. It weighed about 6.5 tons and could carry more supplies or tow heavier equipment. France built over 400 of these vehicles before the defeat. They served primarily as ammunition carriers and artillery tractors. The Lorraine 37L had an open-top design and no armament. A crew of 2 operated the vehicle, which could reach 35 km per hour. During combat operations, these carriers supplied frontline units with shells and other supplies. The tracks allowed them to keep up with armored formations over rough terrain. After the French surrender, Germany found these vehicles extremely useful and captured hundreds. Many were converted into self-propelled anti-tank guns, artillery pieces, or rocket launchers. Renault R39. The Renault R39 was a variant of the R35 tank with some minor improvements. Very few were produced before France fell. This version attempted to address some weaknesses of the original design, with slightly better armor arrangement. The French army received only a small number before the German invasion. These tanks carried the same short 37mm gun as the R35. Performance in combat was similar to the standard R35, meaning they were slow, undergunned, and hampered by poor crew layout. The R39 never had a chance to prove if its improvements made any real difference. Most were either destroyed during the Battle of France or captured by German forces. FCM-2C. The FCM-2C was the designation sometimes used for variants of the Super Heavy Char 2C tank. These vehicles were World War I designs that survived into 1940. As mentioned earlier, all were destroyed or abandoned during the German invasion. One variant carried a 155mm howitzer for bunker destruction. These massive vehicles had no practical combat value in 1940. They were too slow, too conspicuous, and too mechanically unreliable for modern warfare. The handful that existed represented France's past rather than its future. They never fired a shot in anger during World War II. Renault AGC. The Renault AGC experimental tank existed only as trials vehicles. These prototypes tested new concepts in armor and weaponry. The French army never adopted them for service. When Germany invaded, these experimental vehicles were either incomplete or sitting in testing facilities. They played no role in the Battle of France. The AGC program represented France's attempts to develop better armored vehicles, but time ran out. After occupying France, Germany may have examined these prototypes, but found no value in continuing the development. Armored cars and wheeled vehicles. Panhard 178. The Panhard 178 was France's most modern armored car in 1940. It weighed 8.5 tons and featured four-wheel drive with excellent cross-country ability. The vehicle mounted a 25mm gun in a turret that could rotate 360 degrees. France produced about 500 before the defeat. The Panhard 178 equipped cavalry reconnaissance units and could reach 72 km/h on roads. During the Battle of France, these armored cars performed scouting missions and screening duties. They showed good mobility and reliability. The 25mm gun could damage light German tanks, but struggled against medium armor. The four-man crew included a driver, commander, gunner, and radio operator. After France surrendered, Germany captured many of these vehicles and put them into service with occupation forces and security units. AMD Lafley 50. AMD Lafley 50. AM was a wheeled armored car with off-road capability. It weighed about 6 tons and carried a 25mm gun. France built approximately 100 of these vehicles in the late 1930s. They served with cavalry units for reconnaissance work. The Lafley 50 AM featured good mobility on roads but struggled in mud or soft ground, despite having four-wheel drive. During combat in 1940, these armored cars scouted ahead of French formations. The Thing armor protected only against small arms. The three-man crew operated in cramped conditions. Speed reached 60 km/h on good surfaces. These vehicles saw limited action, and many were captured by German forces after France fell. Panhard 165-175 TOE. The Panhard 165-175 TOE was a colonial version of French armored cars, designed for service in North Africa and other overseas territories. These vehicles were simpler than European models, with adaptations for harsh climates. Several dozen served in French colonies. They weighed about 6.5 tons and mounted machine guns or light cannons. When Germany invaded France, these armored cars remained overseas. Some later fought in North Africa when Allied forces clashed with Vichy French units. The vehicle showed decent reliability in desert conditions. Speed and armor, their main value was in colonial policing and light combat duties. White Lafley AMD 50. The White Lafley AMD 50 combined a French chassis with American components. About 30 were built before the war. This armored car weighed 7 tons and carried a 37mm gun or 25mm gun, depending on the version. The vehicle had four-wheel drive for improved off-road performance. French cavalry units used them for reconnaissance alongside other armored cars. During the 1940 campaign, they performed similarly to other wheeled reconnaissance vehicles. The armor was thin, mobility was good, and firepower was adequate for scouting work. After the French defeat, surviving examples were captured by Germany or escaped to continue fighting with Free French forces. Lafley V15T. The Lafley V15T was a light reconnaissance vehicle built on a truck chassis. It weighed only 3 tons and had minimal armor protection. France produced several hundred for cavalry and infantry reconnaissance units. The vehicle carried a machine gun for self-defense. Speed reached 70 km/h on roads thanks to the truck-based design. During combat operations, Lafley V15Ts performed liaison and scouting duties. The light armor barely stopped rifle bullets, making them vulnerable to all enemy fire. The crew of 3 included a driver, commander, and machine gunner. These vehicles were inexpensive and available in good numbers, but offered little combat capability. Many were destroyed or abandoned during France's rapid defeat. Citroën Cagresse P28. The Citroën Cagresse P28 was an unusual half-track vehicle with a front wheel and rear tracks. France used these vehicles in the 1920s and 1930s for various military purposes. By 1940, most were obsolete, but some remained in service. They weighed about 2 tons and carried no armor. Functioning as utility vehicles, the P-28 could transport troops or supplies across difficult terrain. During World War II, their main value was in logistics and transport. The rubber track system gave good cross-country mobility. Speed was limited to about 40 kilometers per hour. Most Citroën K-Gres vehicles in service during 1940 were captured or destroyed early in the campaign. Lafley W15 TCC. The Lafley W15 TCC was an armored truck used for transporting troops. It featured light armor protection and could carry a squad of soldiers in the rear. France built about 300 of these vehicles. They served with cavalry and infantry units for moving troops quickly on roads. The W15 TCC had 4-wheel drive for improved mobility. During the Battle of France, these vehicles transported soldiers to combat zones. The armor protected only against small arms fire. Any heavy weapon could penetrate it easily. Speed reached 60 kilometers per hour. The design prioritized nobility over protection. After France fell, many were captured and used by German occupation forces. Berliet VUDB. The Berliet VUDB was an armored personnel carrier on a truck chassis. France produced small numbers for military use. It weighed about 5.5 tons, with armor plating, and could carry troops in a protected compartment. The VUDB served mainly with motorized infantry units. During the 1940 campaign, these vehicles moved soldiers to the front lines. Protection was adequate, only against rifle fire. The vehicle had no armament except what the infantry carried. Speed was similar to standard military trucks, at around 50 kilometers per hour. Most were destroyed or captured during France's defeat. Samoa MCG half-track. The Samoa MCG half-track served as an artillery tractor and troop carrier. France built several hundred before the war. This vehicle combined front wheels with rear tracks for good cross-country mobility. It weighed about 6.5 tons and could tow artillery pieces or carry supplies. The MCG had light armor protection and typically mounted a machine gun. During combat, these half-tracks pulled artillery into position and transported ammunition. They proved reliable and useful for mechanized units. Speed reached 45 kilometers per hour. After France fell, Germany captured many MCG half-tracks and used them for various purposes, including artillery tractors and supply vehicles. Unique P-107 half-track. The Unique P-107 half-track was another French artillery tractor design. It combined wheeled front axle with tracked rear section. France produced these vehicles to motorize artillery units. The P-107 could tow medium and heavy guns across rough terrain. During the Battle of France, these half-tracks served with artillery regiments. They showed good mobility and reliability. The design had no armor and no armament. Crew size varied depending on the mission, but typically included 2 or 3 soldiers. Speed reached about 40 kilometers per hour. German forces captured numerous P-17 half-tracks after the French surrender and incorporated them into their own artillery units. Self-propelled artillery and tank destroyers. Lafley W15 TCC Cannon D47mm. The Lafley W15 TCC/Cannon D47mm was an improvised tank destroyer created by mounting a 47mm anti-tank gun on a truck chassis. France produced a small number during the desperate days of May 1940. These vehicles used the Lafley W15 TCC truck with the gun mounted in an open fighting compartment. The conversion happened quickly to provide mobile anti-tank capability. During combat, these improvised vehicles engaged German tanks from ambush positions. The 47mm gun could penetrate most German armor at reasonable ranges. However, the crew had almost no protection. Any return fire could disable the vehicle and kill the crew. Speed and mobility came from the truck chassis. Very few survived the Battle of France. Lorraine 37L Cannon D47mm. The Lorraine 37L Cannon D47mm combined the tracked Lorraine carrier with a 47mm anti-tank gun. This conversion created a mobile tank destroyer with better cross-country ability than wheeled vehicles. France produced only a handful before the defeat. The gun mounted in an open compartment with a small shield for the crew. These vehicles could keep up with armored formations and engage enemy tanks. The 47mm gun was effective against German armor in 1940. The tracked chassis provided stability for firing. However, The open design left the crew exposed to artillery and infantry fire. After France fell, Germany captured some of these vehicles and may have continued using them or studied the design. Renault UAE Cannon de 37mm. The Renault UE Cannon de 37mm was a tiny, improvised tank destroyer. The French mounted a 37mm anti-tank gun on the small Renault UE carrier. Very few were produced as this was an emergency measure. The vehicle is too small to be effective, with the gun taking up most of the space. The minimal armor provided no real protection for the crew. During combat, these makeshift vehicles had very limited value. The 37mm gun lacked power against heavier German tanks. The small size made it difficult to operate the weapon effectively. Most were likely destroyed or abandoned during the French retreat. FCM-36 Mortier. The FCM-36/Mortier was a modified FCM-36 tank that carried a mortar instead of the normal gun. A few were converted for infantry support. The mortar provided indirect fire capability to support attacking troops. These vehicles operated during the Battle of France in limited numbers. The conversion removed the 37mm gun and replaced it with a breech-loading mortar. The vehicle could move with infantry and provide close fire support. Protection came from the tank's existing armor. However, the mortar had limited range and effectiveness. The conversion represented an attempt to make better use of available resources. Few survived the campaign. Lorraine 37L Cannon de 75mm. The Lorraine 37L Cannon de 75mm attempted to create self-propelled artillery by mounting a 75mm field gun on the Lorraine carrier. France produced very few of these conversions. The gun, mounted in an open superstructure with limited traverse. These vehicles could provide mobile fire support for mechanized units. The 75mm gun fired standard artillery shells. However, the open design exposed the crew to counter-battery fire. The vehicle had to stop to fire accurately. During the brief period they were available, these self-propelled guns saw limited combat use. The concept was sound, but came too late to affect the campaign's outcome. Sumar MCL Cannon de 75mm. The Sumar MCL Cannon de 75mm used the Sumar half-track as a base for self-propelled artillery. A small number were created by mounting 75mm guns on the vehicle. These conversions served with artillery units during the 1940 campaign. The half-track provided better mobility than towed guns, allowing artillery to reposition quickly. The gun crew operated in an open fighting compartment. During combat, these vehicles supported French counterattacks with direct and indirect fire. The 75mm gun was effective, but the vehicle lacked protection. Most were destroyed during Germany's rapid advance through France. Renault UE Chenilette Mortier de 81mm. The Renault UE Chenilette carried an 81mm mortar on the small Renault carrier. France produced a modest number for infantry support. The mortar provided indirect fire capability at the company or battalion level. These vehicles moved with infantry units and set up quickly to fire. The crew operated in the open with no overhead protection. During the Battle of France, these mortar carriers supported infantry attacks. The 81mm mortar was effective against enemy positions and troops. However, the vehicle itself was vulnerable to all forms of enemy fire. The small size made it difficult to carry much ammunition. Hotchkiss H39 Cannon D25mm. The Hotchkiss H39 Cannon D25mm was an experimental conversion that replaced the tank's 37mm gun with a longer 25mm weapon. Very few were produced as tests. The 25mm gun had better armor penetration than the standard gun. These vehicles remained experimental when Germany invaded. They saw little or no combat service. The conversion aimed to improve the H-39's anti-tank capability without a complete redesign. After France fell, any surviving examples were likely captured. The project showed French attempts to upgrade existing vehicles quickly. Rommel R35 Lance Flams. The Rommel R35 Lance Flams was a flamethrower tank conversion. A small number of R35 tanks had their guns replaced with flame projectors. These vehicles were intended for attacking fortifications and bunkers. During the Battle of France, a few saw combat against German positions. The flamethrower had a short range of about 40 meters. The vehicle carried limited fuel for the weapon. Armor protection was the same as standard R-35 tanks. The conversion made the vehicle very specialized and vulnerable to enemy fire. Most flamethrower tanks were destroyed or abandoned during France's defeat. Char B1 bis Lance-Flammes. The Char B1 bis Lance-Flammes was another flamethrower conversion using the heavy Char B1 bis as a base. Very few were converted before France fell. The flame projector replaced one of the tank's guns. These vehicles were designed to assault heavily defended positions. The thick armor of the Char B1 bis made them better suited for this dangerous role than lighter tanks. However, the flamethrower's short range required getting very close to targets. During the limited time they were available, these vehicles saw minimal combat use. The few that existed were likely captured or destroyed when France surrendered. Specialized and command vehicles. Char B1 bis command variant. The Char B1 bis command variant served as mobile headquarters for armored unit commanders. France converted several Char B1 bis tanks by adding extra radio equipment. These vehicles allowed senior officers to control multiple tank companies from forward positions. The command tanks kept their weapons, but carried additional communications gear and staff officers. During the Battle of France, these vehicles helped coordinate French armored operations. The thick armor protected valuable command staff from enemy fire. However, the limited number available meant most units lacked dedicated command vehicles. Radio equipment in 1940 was bulky and often unreliable. After France fell, Germany captured some command tanks, but preferred their own command vehicle designs. Samua S-35 command version. The Samua S-35 command version adapted the excellent S-35 tank for command duties. Several were fitted with extra radios to control cavalry formations. These vehicles maintained their combat capability while serving as mobile command posts. French cavalry officers used them to lead mechanized units. During combat operations, Command S-35s coordinated tank and armored car movements. The additional radio equipment took up space inside the already cramped turret. The commander had to balance fighting and directing other units. These vehicles proved their worth in several engagements, but there were never enough of them. Germany captured many after the French surrender. Citroën Cagresse P-17 half-track. The Citroën Cagresse P-17 half-track served as a command and liaison vehicle. France used these vehicles for headquarters units and communication duties. The half-track design provided good mobility across rough terrain. Command versions carried multiple radios and mapboards. During the 1940 campaign, P-17 half-tracks served at division and corps headquarters. They allowed senior officers to move forward and maintain contact with fighting units. The vehicles had minimal armor protection, making them vulnerable to enemy fire. Speed reached about 45 kilometers per hour. Most were captured or destroyed during France's rapid defeat. Lafley S-20TL. The Lafley S-20TL was a specialized artillery observation vehicle. It carried observers who directed artillery fire from forward positions. France produced these vehicles on truck chassis with light armor. The vehicle's radio equipment allowed observers to communicate with artillery batteries. During combat, S-20TL vehicles positioned themselves where they could see enemy formations. The observers then called in artillery strikes. The light armor provided only basic protection. The vehicle was not intended for direct combat. Speed and mobility were adequate for moving between observation positions. After France fell, many were captured by German forces. Renault ANHN. The Renault AHAN armored ambulance transported wounded soldiers from combat zones. France built these vehicles on truck chassis with armored bodies. They could carry several stretcher cases plus medical personnel. The Red Cross markings were supposed to protect them from attack under international law. During the Battle of France, these ambulances evacuated casualties from frontline areas. The armor protected patients and medics from shell fragments and small arms fire. However, the chaos of combat meant some were hit by enemy fire despite their markings. Speed was similar to standard trucks at around 50 kilometers per hour. ENIC U-304. The ENIC U-304 served as a command and radio vehicle for mechanized units. This truck-based vehicle carried extensive communications equipment. France produced these for division and brigade headquarters. The vehicle allowed commanders to maintain contact with subordinate units in higher headquarters. During the 1940 campaign, U-304 vehicles operated at command posts. The radio equipment was essential for coordinating the defense of France. These vehicles had no armor and were not meant for combat zones. They typically remained at rear command posts. Many were captured when German forces overran French headquarters positions. Panhard 165-175. The Panhard 165-175 command version adapted the armored car for command duties with cavalry units. These vehicles carried extra radios and reduced ammunition storage. French cavalry commanders used them to lead reconnaissance formations. During combat operations, command versions of the Panhard 165-175 directed other armored cars and light tanks. The vehicle's mobility allowed commanders to move with fast-moving units. The 25mm gun remained operational for self-defense. However, the additional radio equipment crowded the interior. These vehicles were valuable but produced in small numbers. After France surrendered, Germany captured several and may have used them for occupation forces. Lorraine 37L. The Lorraine 37L ammunition carrier transported shells and supplies to combat units. France produced these in significant numbers, using the reliable Lorraine tracked chassis. These vehicles supplied artillery batteries and tank units with ammunition. During the Battle of France, ammunition carriers were essential for sustaining operations. They could cross rough terrain that stopped wheeled trucks. The open-top design allowed quick loading and unloading. However, this also made them vulnerable to artillery fire. A hit could cause the ammunition cargo to explode. Speed was adequate at about 35 km/h. Many were captured by Germany and proved extremely useful. Renault UE. The Renault UE supply carrier was the smallest logistics vehicle in French service. Thousands were produced to transport supplies to forward infantry units. These tracked carriers moved ammunition, food, water, and equipment to front-line positions. During combat, they proved invaluable for sustaining operations in difficult terrain. The small size allowed them to navigate narrow paths and shell-torn ground. However, the limited cargo capacity meant many trips were needed. The crew of two had no protection from overhead fire. After France fell, Germany adopted these carriers enthusiastically and produced more for their own use. Citroën Type 45 truck. The Citroën Type 45 truck was a standard military cargo vehicle used throughout the French army. Thousands serve in all types of units. These trucks transported troops, supplies, weapons, and equipment. The Type 45 was reliable and could carry substantial loads. During the 1940 campaign, these trucks were the backbone of French logistics. They moved everything needed to keep the army fighting. The vehicles had no armor and were vulnerable to air attack. German aircraft destroyed long columns of trucks during the retreat. Speed was about 50 km/h on good roads. After France's defeat, Germany captured thousands of these trucks and used them extensively for their own logistics needs throughout the war. From the Char B-1 bis heavy tanks to the smallest supply carriers, these were the French vehicles that fought in World War II. Their stories reveal both innovation and the challenges of modern warfare. If you want to see more complete military catalogues, subscribe and turn on notifications for the next episode.